those opportunities that you create for yourself or that happen upon you, whatever, it's what you do with them, right? And you can leverage things into different possibilities and opportunities from having these experiences. And I think that like when you're with people who are like high performers, you can cut me off if you'd like, but and you start in one realm, it automatically like it seeps into all sorts of different like performance in different realms because everything is connected. Today we have Peter Crone on, did I say that right? Crone? On the podcast, and I'm nervous about this one. I actually really am. I was going to say that before we started rolling, because you talk so much about subconscious and conscious, and it like language that it's hard for me and my personality to kind of like grasp and understand, right? But I've seen like some of the work you've done and the things that you talk about, and it's so compelling.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so I wanted to have you on because there's a few little things that I caught through social media that like really resonated, and I think my audience will find everything in your work, what you do, very interesting.
Okay.
So just like, I never really, like I said, read these things, but just so people
just for shits and giggles.
Just for shits and giggles, exactly. Okay, it says here, you're a mindset coach, speaker, and writer known for your work as in personal development, performance optimization, and spiritual well-being. You're referred to as the mind architect, and focuses on helping individuals, athletes, business leaders break free from mental and emotional limitations and reach their full potential. Is that like kind of good enough?
Sounds pretty cool. I'd meet that guy.
Me too. That's why you're here. I wanted to meet that guy. First, let's start with why do you call yourself, or who calls you a mind architect, and what is that?
So I sort of generated the moniker just by virtue of what I call, necessity being the mother of invention, right? Meaning that there wasn't any other title that seemed to be sufficiently appropriate. Like I'd been called a spiritual teacher or a performance coach, or even once a hitman for the ego.
I like that
happiness guru.
Those are good.
They're okay.
Yeah.
But I always was fascinated with architecture, and particularly if you look at some of these sort of sci-fi type movies, which I love, like Inception and Matrix and Doctor Strange, and sort of the architecture of time and space. And really what I recognized what I was actually doing was reorienting people's inner thinking space. So really redesigning who you are for yourself. So the architecture seemed accurate. And where was I doing it? Predominantly in the mind, being as that's the interface between, our unmanifest self and manifest self.
So like, how did you get into this? Because you talk about a lot about the subconscious and how like we have our limiting beliefs and what we thought of like it's so deep rooted, and then we act, and our behavior is based on these ideas and thoughts of ourselves that we're not even aware of.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're not a psychologist, are you?
Not trained. No. Not like I don't have a certificate on my wall. No.
Okay. Well. And the funny thing is, most of the people I know who do have that certificate, like, are the ones who are the most screwed up. Isn't that the irony of life, right?
You said it, not me. But
okay,
yes.
I said it, not you. So, what is your background, and how did you evolve into being this person that people go to kind of get, I guess, like tap into that subconscious?
I went through a lot of my own sort of personal story as a human from a young age. Like I was only child. My mum passed of cancer when I was 7. So that was obviously pretty significant for a little boy. And then, so it was me and my dad. And then at 17, so 10 years later, he went to work. He works on the boats that go between Dover and France, and Dover being the southeast part of England, and then Dover and Zeebrugge, which is in Belgium. So they're ferry liners that carry cargo to people with caravans going on vacation, whatever. And that boat capsized. And so sadly, he passed. So my dad went to work one day and I never saw him again. So they were both obviously significant. So 7 and 17, mum and dad gone. I had a stepmother. She wasn't married to my dad, but she'd moved in. So she was there for like the last 4 or 5 years prior to that. So she came in when I was about 12 or 13 or so. And so, there was a semblance of some sort of adult figure taking care of stuff. But that really forged me into this, more exacerbated form of survival that I assert every human being has. Like we, as mammals, our primordial imperative is just to make it. We just want to survive.
Right.
And so mine got obviously heightened at that point, didn't know where I was going to go. I eventually went to college, did very well. I actually skipped a year because my grades all got affected. But
where'd you go to college? You back in London?
Back in the UK. Back in the UK. So a place called Loughborough, which was renowned more for sort of its athletic prowess, but it was sort of top 5, Oxford and Cambridge of the world, equivalent to the Harvards and stuff.
Yeah.
And then sort of in the top 5, it was a great school. And so that was an amazing, I did 3 years undergrad. I did a postgrad for a year, stayed on. And then I very soon after that came to the States, originally just for an experience. Like they did, exchange programs where they pay you $50 a month or something to come and coach entitled kids tennis. That's what I was doing.
Were you a tennis player?
I wasn't like as a college performing D1 here or whatever you'd call it.
Yeah.
I love tennis. I was a good athlete.
Okay.
But I didn't compete for the school. I played different sports for the school, but I didn't play tennis. But I was good enough that I took my certification program so I could teach, kids. And so it just brought me to the States. They pay for your flight. They put you in a bunk with these 8, obnoxious teenagers.
Yes, I know all about it.
Yes, that was quite fun. Where their kids have, the parents have booted them out of Manhattan. It was in upstate New York. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
So it was a great introduction to the States, made some great friends. And then that led to one thing that then I came to California originally and stayed with a friend of mine that I'd met at the camp. He was trying to make a movie. I got involved with him, made the movie. It was, a great experience, but a terrible business.
Right.
It was, 3 24-year-olds doing the best they could.
Oh, wow.
So
How old are you now?
Now I'm 55.
Okay, you look amazing. You're 55?
Yeah.
What are you? Okay, that's a whole other podcast altogether.
Yeah.
You do not look 55.
No, thank you.
That's amazing. You look much younger.
Yeah. No, my thank you. I appreciate it. I play tennis still with kids who are half my age. I'm still the quickest on the court.
Yeah, that's okay. I want to get into all that stuff later because it's really incredible that you've obviously maintained your youth very well. So then you've been here for like many years, like 25 years or so, 30 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So you were like in movies and like you were helping people. I understand because my background's fitness and like we start like if you start doing things physically, it does make a big difference in the mental performance, like mental strength, physical strength. It's all kind of.
Absolutely. That's where I started actually.
Really?
Yeah. So it's common knowledge, so I can say it, but I was Tom Cruise's trainer for a few years.
You were?
Yeah, for Mission Possibles and Moulin Rouge with Nicole in Australia and stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, this is great. I was called for Tom Cruise many years ago. Are you a Scientologist?
No, not at all. No,
because he was only hiring it at some point, only Scientologists.
Yes, that was after I had left at the time. And a lot of the staff was, but I wasn't, and a lot of staff weren't. But I guess he changed that afterwards.
So wait, so what movies did you do for him?
Oh, there were a lot. I was with him for 5 years. So
okay, I want to know what this is like. By the way, Mission Impossible is my favorite movie of all time, all of them, the whole series.
Yeah.
And I'm obsessed.
So these were
with them.
early. I don't know if it was the very first one, but it was a couple afterward, 2 and 3. We did a couple together. Moulin Rouge with Nicole. We did the others. We did Minority Report. I can't remember those.
I understand.
We did the Blue Room in London and New York, which New York was a Broadway show that Nicole had done. It was amazing. I lost track of all the movies. Jerry Maguire was on the back of that. He was just finishing that. She had done Peacemaker with George Clooney. Yeah, so it was 5 years. But anyway.
That's huge because he's like the most intense of, I would imagine, more than I would. Was he as intense, I should ask you, as his reputation says?
It comes down to how you define words. I would say he was passionate. I wouldn't say he was intense. I would say he's the ardent professional. I learned a lot from him. I have nothing but good words to say about my experience with them. He was the quintessential professional. I mean, he did everything so well with such integrity. And that was really inspiring to see.
Did you have to be on clock like 24/7? Because he would train like at 3:00 in the morning if you wanted to.
No. It was a unique setup, and that was a big part of my history. So I'm not sure it's so relevant today.
Oh, it is relevant though. Yeah, I'll tell you why it's relevant.
Okay.
Because I think that in my experience, my life, I have a background similar to you then, but that leads like those opportunities that you create for yourself or that happen upon you, whatever, it's what you do with them, right?
Yeah.
And it's you can leverage things into different possibilities and opportunities from having these experiences.
Yes.
And I think that like when you're with people who are like high performers, this is you can cut me off if you'd like, but and you start in one realm, it automatically it seeps into all sorts of different like performance in different realms because everything is connected.
Yeah. No, it definitely, for a kid who had been orphaned in England and didn't come from wealth or anything, like wasn't left a penny. It actually went to my then stepmother. So I came to the States with about $200.
Right. Wow.
Which was tough. And I was sleeping on a very stained and not pleasantly smelling rent-controlled apartment carpet, in a living room with buddies. And so that was very humbling, but in a way that it's really made me appreciate everything that I have. And so to your point, yes, when I was then in this environment with the jets and everything that you could imagine, it sort of like you sort of soak a piece of meat in whatever marinade, it's going to absorb it, right? So through the process of osmosis, I was starting to imbibe my own higher frequencies of what becomes possible. So whilst I was a small cog in a big machine, I'm very grateful for the experience. It did open my eyes to different ways of looking at life. And of course, then people, there was press clips and things of what I was doing. And so there's a little bit of notoriety that came with it that then afforded me to work with other people who were high performers. So it did start a new trajectory. And that's why I'm super grateful for the experience.
So what was the first thing that you did that kind of took on a life, like took on a new life?
So when I left, much to the chagrin of kind of both of them, which was nice because they really enjoyed my company and we had great results together. But I just recognized that as much as I could transform a body, which was somewhat child's play, meaning because I'd studied exercise physiology, human biology as my undergrad, I kind of knew the ins and outs of anatomy to physiology and biomechanics. So that was relatively easy. And I got the job with them because I was a trainer originally and I was getting such incredible results. So my name was thrown in a hat for a possible replacement for their old trainer. So, but what I recognized was that takes time, right? In the world of matter, you need time and space in order to make true, significant transformation. And I had already been fascinated with philosophy, the mind, why do humans do what they do? I was also a ski instructor for a while, and I can remember distinct moments where I would be watching two people I was helping, same age, same experience, same sort of seemingly athletic ability, but one was sort of had this trepidation and scared, and the other one went for it. And I'm like, it's got nothing to do with equipment anymore, right? It's about perception. Mm-hmm. So that really opened up this whole line of coaching at the time. I just was sort of doing friends and family to start, seeing if I actually had, anything decent to say. And then it really took off very quickly when I got some professional athletes who started to triple winnings and things like that, on a professional level where they were changing nothing but their mindset and, golf and then baseball. And so that kind of really, that accelerated my career very quickly then.
So, right, because you talk so much about, it's all about like limiting beliefs. Like at what point in your mind, or have you seen where talent takes you so far and then it comes into like, if you actually think you can, or the mindset you have, or the limiting belief that you can, like all your experience that you just said, what is that one thing that holds one person back and allows the other person to thrive and go so much further, even if that other person had more talent?
I don't know if there's one thing. I mean, what's come through me, the uniqueness and sort of proprietary nature of my work is I've delineated these 10 prisons of the subconscious that we all have. So you could argue that actually somebody's constraint becomes the impetus for their success. Like somebody like a Kobe, he thrived on making people wrong. I would say it's a limited way of actually becoming accomplished because you're being defined by a negative, if that makes sense, right? It does. It's like, so even though it can get people a long way, it typically is being driven by the energy of fear. So with my athletes, there's the myriad of like, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, whatever it is that holds any human being back. So they could have all the talent in the world, just like you probably have friends and family who are brilliant and they have a lot of potential, but they don't know why they can't access a loving relationship, a 9-10 figure business or whatever they want, or health in their body. So it's these sort of blind spots that hold people back, which is sort of my area of expertise to reveal. Yeah. And as Carl Jung said, he had a beautiful quote. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will drive your life and you'll call it fate.
I heard you say that actually. Yeah. I saw that clip that you talked about that. And I'm so fascinated by this because it's 100% true. Yeah. And this is the pool that you play in. Yeah. So that we could do like a whole hour just on that. Like why we do all have, it's always the people who are the smartest who are, sometimes they overthink their way into analysis paralysis, right? Yeah. And that's why I think sometimes people who are I hate to say it, but like the less intelligent or people who aren't that smart get way further in life because they have nothing holding them back. They're like, why not? I'll just go for it, right?
Exactly.
Versus the people, they overthink, they analyze, their brain becomes their prison.
I don't know, well, you probably know because you've listened to some of my stuff, but I tend to download in quotes. So I have a quote to that point about intelligence where I said, being smart doesn't make you any happier. It just makes your reasons why you're not way more convincing.
That's 100% true.
So the people who have the IQs, the EQs, they're able to discern and to justify, rationalize why things won't work. So, I could say if there was one catch-all for your question about what is the one thing that holds people back, oftentimes it's the accumulation of disappointment or failure. Right. So you think about a young mind in whatever regards, whether it's walking, tasting something, going up to a girl for the first time, there's a certain innate cavalier part of being human where we're just curious. But then when you've had disappointments and trials and tribulations, the more you've accumulated, then the more your brain uses that as evidence as to why it's not going to work. So again, one of my quotes, I say, past hurt informs future fear. So the greater the hurt, then sort of the commensurate energy that comes with that is now fear. So kind of the younger you are, which with a lot of my pro athletes, most of them are, then there's this sort of more fuck it kind of attitude, you know? So, which to me is really representative of one of my favorite qualities, which is commitment. Like most people just aren't committed in filling the gap, relationships, their health, their career, their sleep program, whatever it is, like, they're not really committed. And that's not a judgment. It's just an observation for people, maybe even as they listen to that, go, holy shit, like I struggle with that, the absence of commitment in my life. So athletes who are successful have less accumulated baggage, and ideally combined with a lot more commitment.
How about regular people who are not athletes?
Same.
Just smart.
We're all athletes. We're all performers at the end of the day. You're a mom, you have a show, you have a business, you're a performer, right? And so I work with corporations and I look at the corporate athlete. It's the same thing, right? Like what is your discipline, your dedication, how clear are you on what you're wanting to accomplish? Where are your big audacious goals that you're trying to get to? Same with everybody.
Then how do you help somebody break free from that? Like their limited belief. Like what if they don't know it themselves? Like what's the process? Can you walk me through what like the process is to even begin really knowing what's in your subconscious mind?
Yeah, it's quite insidious, and for that reason, it's like kind of fine surgery. Michelangelo was asked, "How did you create this beautiful sculpture of David out of a big piece of marble?"
Yeah,
and he said, "I didn't. David was already in there. I just chipped away everything that wasn't David." Right, which is beautiful. So I think, early on in life, we take big chunks off the corner. Right, you can maybe just see the corner of a shoulder, but what I'm working on is sort of the details around the eyelids and the nostrils. Right, so it's very subtle.
Yeah.
So it's sort of brain surgery a little bit, quite literally.
Right, literally.
So the process is you're, a human being, whoever I'm working with, whatever walk of life, and you feel some constraint, some resistance, some frustration. There's a degree of you're not fulfilling on your version of potential, or life isn't the way you want it, or, further down the line of imbalances, you're sick, or you have anxiety or depression or addiction, right? Most of my people are pretty robust, they have successful lives, they just want to go to the next level.
Right.
But it runs the gamut, right? People to the point of like I've helped people who are suicidal, and help them understand they're actually not. That's just a part of their subconscious that is asking to be relinquished. So they don't want to die. Part of the software that no longer serves them wants to die. And that distinction alone has saved many lives, right?
Wow.
Do you see that?
Yeah. But how do you know that? Like if someone... How do you even get into that subconscious? Do you hypnotize them? Is that a way to do it?
So I can hear it. So to finish the question, so whatever area of life they're being triggered in, and there's normally only a few because of humans, our details are very complex. It's an uncle here, an aunt, a wife, a kid, a boss, but it's all the same. It's like we kind of have family stuff, we have health body stuff, we have maybe money stuff, we have career stuff, and then maybe hobbies and passion. It's like humans don't talk about too many things. Right.
There's buckets.
There's buckets that, we all are basically committed to and attached to. So wherever the people get triggered, I use that as an access point to reverse engineer what is it that must be revealing about you as a human where you're not okay with something. So again, one of my quotes I love, one of my favorites is life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. So meaning that it's the opportunity that life is to be human, is that we, scurry around doing the best we can, thinking we're trying to get somewhere, and we get pissed off, upset, triggered, hurt, whatever it is. And that's where, for me, without getting too poetic and esoteric out of the gate, if we're these divine, integrous beings who are timeless and limitless, meaning there's nothing that we can't handle, there's nothing we can't create. But if we get stopped by something, then that's where the subconscious is caught in some pretense or a lie that you're not good enough, or you're not lovable, or you're not safe. So for me, this whole dimension of humanity on planet Earth is because we all came here to break free from the constraints with which we arrived. So that's the process, is where do you get pissed off? Where do you get triggered? That's gold. And if you're with someone who knows how to reverse engineer it, then you'll discover why you get triggered. Because again, unless it's life threatening, it's just ego threatening. Right. And most of the time, it's 99.999%, it's ego threatening. So then that's the gold, right?
So ego threatening is what? How do you define that?
Ego threatening meaning that you got upset by something.
Right.
Jennifer got pissed off because, or she's hurt because, or she's scared because, right? There's even because we're under the illusion that we're at the effect of life. Oh, why are you upset? Oh, because somebody cut me off in traffic. Well, no, you're not upset because of that. Someone just cut you off in traffic. You're upset because of the way you react to it. And that's all us. So we become the author of our own experience when you start to realize the power of responsibility. Most people don't want that. They want to point fingers. Like I'm pissed off because my husband, or my wife, or my kids, or my boss. And so then you become a victim. It's sort of a powerless way to live life.
Very much so.
Yeah, so I undo all of that and help people to discover their own authorship. They are the genesis of their own experience.
It must be hard. I mean, I would imagine the reverse engineering of it and making people see things don't people easily just revert back to how they were? It's easy to do that, like you're saying.
It's easy, and they can. And again, it's dependent a little bit on age. The older we are, the more established all of our habits, patterns, neural pathways are.
Yeah.
So working with youngsters, it's sort of like, the transformations can be instantaneous and lasting. So you need some time, like anything. Like, you're an athlete, so whatever sports you play, I love golf and tennis and skiing. And if someone was looking at my swing, they might have the most beautiful insight about what I'm doing. And I could maybe feel it when I'm with a coach, but then it's up to me to go and practice it so it becomes ingrained. No different with the mind, it's even more slippery though. It's a bit more subtle.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. There's what I call the two main buckets of awareness of your blind spot, bring the unconscious conscious, as Carl Jung said. And then there's the practice of this new set of eyes that you're looking through, of like, oh my God, I always thought my mum was fill in the blank. And so I've communicated with her like that, but that's based on my history of her, and that's not who she is today. So we sustain our images of things, and then we perpetuate, because the ego wants to be right, even though what it's being right about are limitations, which is insane.
Right. We want to convince ourselves that what we think is actually true.
Yeah.
Is that why what the words we say are so important?
Yes. Yeah.
Even if you say things, I was told the other day something like, even if you're saying something in jest or joking, like, oh God, I'm so dumb because I forgot that. Like your brain, they said, doesn't have a sense of humor. So they don't know you're joking. If you say the word, I'm so dumb, haha.
Yeah.
They just think in that word, I'm so dumb, or just becomes the loop.
And it's a little bit more slippery than that, because even what generates the I'm so dumb, because by the time you've had a conscious thought or an expression, it's being generated from a subconscious pattern. So that statement, I'm dumb, as a way of defacing ourselves or mocking ourselves or joking, that only exists because of who you are at a deeper level to even say it in the first place.
Right. Oh God. See, this is where I get. I got to really pay attention. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. We're not. Yeah.
So say that again. So
this isn't the Snicker bar version.
This is not that. Yeah. Exactly. I got to really laser
think
focus.
about it this way. So this house that we're in, beautiful house, can only exist because of the foundations. But we can't see the foundations. But nonetheless, the house could not exist if it weren't for them. Nor could we build a bigger house relative to the size of the foundation.
Right.
So think of the foundations like the subconscious.
Yep.
So everything that happens in this house is directly commensurate with the foundations that allow for it.
Yes, I'm following you. Yes.
Yeah, so likewise, someone's personality and their conscious thoughts and the words they say can only exist to the degree that their foundations of their subconscious allow.
Right, so you can't change the foundation.
No, well, you can because...
You can?
Yeah, you can. That's sort of mental, emotional excavation, I guess.
I guess, yeah,
That's the re-architecture. But you can, because the difference between the concrete that's beneath us, this is based in language, which is why words are so important, because subconscious constraints are also based in programming. So, for example, the I'm not enough, which everybody can relate to, will manifest differently depending on somebody's circumstances and their proclivities towards, whatever it is, focused on relationships, focused on money. It will manifest in that way. But the I'm not enough isn't an inherent truth. It's just a constraint. But if it's been there for 40 years, it's very convincing for that person. They'll say, oh, I'm so dumb, or, oh, I'm never going to meet anyone, or why was I trying to start a business? I'm so stupid to think that I would be successful. Those words make sense for somebody at a deeper foundational level think that they're not enough.
Right.
So you see, so what I would do is hear those things. They're not truths. Like, there's no truth in saying I'm dumb or I'm an idiot or I'm a failure. That's not a truth. It's a statement, a declaration that reinforces a deeper narrative. If we can access that, this is what I do in my masterminds or when I'm working with people, it's so revelatory, it's so moving, because people are like, holy shit, like, I don't even know what I could do now, because you're not being confined by anything anymore.
Right. And you in your work, you can actually take away that ideology at a foundational level.
Yes.
How? Like, you're in a mastermind. I'm in your Like, I like to know the nitty gritty.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love your attention to detail.
It's the attention, because I feel like, especially on this podcast or like in my life, I'm sure with you too, like, you meet a lot of different people, experts in this and experts in that.
Yeah.
And they give you this very panoramic, big, overarching ideologies. But in real life, it's really hard to kind of
for sure. Conceptual, yes. So last Saturday in my mastermind, which just started, it's a 3.5 month process. We meet every 2 weeks on a Saturday. It's a long day. I do theory and then I coach people. So one of the women I was coaching, she had people from all around the world who attend, and she's in Holland, and she's a mum of 2 kids. And she had a question. She struggles with migraines, and particularly around her cycle, and there's some sort of physiological associations. But really what it came down to, her deep subconscious pattern was, it's all up to her. That it's not like she's thinking that. It's almost so, well, yeah, I'm a single mom. Of course, it's like it's so commonplace for her to act that way. But it started when she was young, and she had to drive her dad, who was an alcoholic. And when she's a kid, having all of this responsibility put onto her that wasn't hers to have.
Right.
So she, from a very young age, developed the idea that lives are in danger. It's not like she's saying this, but these are her care providers, and she's young.
Right.
So for a kid who's really dependent, she had to, it's the energy of resistance. If you have to, you must, you need to. These words carry weight, right? So for a kid, it's like, I literally have to keep my dad alive because he's the one paying or providing food or shelter, right?
Right.
But then that continued, so now it's perfect. She's fulfilling on the sentence of her subconscious, which we all do. So now she's a single mom, and now she feels like it's incumbent upon her to do everything. I understand the logic of it, but it's not a truth. So how do I undo that? I take people through an exercise. So, for example, I said, if I cut you open, am I going to find a manufacturing label that says, da-da-da, you're from Holland, it's all up to you? And she laughs and said, no, of course not. I'm like, okay, so it's not part of your hardware. So where does it exist? She's like, well, it's what I believe. Okay, great. So it's software. Software we can play with, right? I can't change the color of your eyes. I'm not at that level yet. But
yet.
Yes. I throw that in there.
Exactly.
Stay in the possibility of it. But the language, that I could do something with. So then I said, okay, so where does it exist? She's like, well, it's in my mind. Great. What's its format? Well, it's all up to me. It's words, right? Okay, yeah. So if it's just words, is it an absolute truth? I get it's how you feel. I get it's what you've done. But is it a truth that it's all up to you? And she really got it. She said, no, it's not a truth. You see the shoulders drop, the physiological breathing patterns change. And it was so beautiful. And this will be coming out because we can use it as a podcast episode. And she said, oh my God, I don't even, I've just been introduced to a world I don't even know how to explore. And it's so profound. That's my response normally, is I'm introducing you to a world that you're not familiar with. Because when you've lived in the world from a very young age, we had a few years prior when we're just free and kids and we do whatever and we throw up on people's, we don't know we're doing anything wrong. And then suddenly we learn at one point that being us isn't enough. Like there's something that kicks in at a very young age, the terrible twos, because we start to hear wrong, bad, don't do this. So it's a very interesting part in the arc of a human being's personality where suddenly we're told that who we are is no longer just unconditionally loved.
Right.
And then from that point forth, all we're doing is trying to get that back.
I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
And so it all stems from an experience or a time in your childhood that you're acting out in adulthood, I guess.
Yeah, that's continued because it was so jarring. Sometimes it's really traumatic. I've helped a lot of people who've had some abhorrent things happen to them, the whole world of sexual abuse and, which sadly happens to a lot of kids. And now it's a parent or a child, an adult who's managing real physical sickness, real trauma in relationships, which is still playing out the unreconciled trauma from childhood.
Do you notice, are there specific patterns that you see over and over again?
Yes.
Okay, what are they?
Well, some of the most common ones are the feeling of inadequacy, like I'm not enough. For women particularly, the feeling of insecurity, like we're not safe, as a woman, because sadly for hundreds of years, the patriarchal has been somewhat abusive, in varying degrees, right? And then some sense of scarcity. They're the three main buckets that everybody has. There's something fundamentally wrong with me. I'm not safe in the world. Like I can't just leave my house open, no worries. Like there's crime out there. The world is dangerous, right?
Right.
And then there's never enough. Like even I've worked with, 15, 20 billionaires and they're still in a scarcity mindset because it's part of the human condition.
So then how does that even stop? But you're saying even earlier, even the Kobe, for example, he became really successful because of a chip on his shoulder that he had to prove, he had to prove that he's not, that he is enough, right? That's what I see all the time too. I think that whole thing, when I talk to a lot of people, that's kind of when you peel back the layers, that's really what kind of motivates a lot of people, right?
It does, yeah.
Because they're trying to prove something to themselves subconsciously, that they are enough, that they can do it, that just that they just are relentless. That will be what it takes.
But you just said it there in your own speaking, like they're trying to prove it to themselves.
Yeah, prove it to themselves.
Me against me, right? It's my story of inadequacy that I think is because my dad said I'm a loser and I'll never amount to anything. But actually, that's just one thing that he said that probably took like 10 seconds, but I've been carrying for a decade.
Yeah.
2 decades, 3 decades. So are you fighting your dad anymore, or are you fighting your own belief that you've actually started to own and identify as? And that's the old analogy of driving a car with one foot on the brake and one foot on the accelerator at the same time, which is how most people live their lives and why they get sick.
Well, you said something. Hold on. I want to open this
Reference
thing up.
your notes.
Yeah, but that I haven't even looked at. Okay, so I can't find it now, but it was really, really good. And I now don't remember what it was, but it was like where you think you are, something like, you help people go from where they are to where they think they should be.
Yeah.
Because I think that where we think we should be versus where we actually are is why people get so frustrated and depressed and upset, because they always think they should have had a different life that they have right now.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I do live events now, and I spoke recently at one of them talking about how it's incredible the amount of energy a human being exerts and puts into trying not to be where they are.
That's I think what social media has done though too, right?
It certainly contributed to it. It does. Social media in and of itself is not doing anything. It's just appealing to these mechanisms of one of the fundamental prisons where we think that the way our life is, isn't it? But we're getting there.
Right.
Right, so but you can never get there because you're never in the future. There's only the proverbial now that Eckhart Tolle has been talking about for 40 years.
Oh my God. By the way, am I the only person who talks to you that has to really listen intently to it's not just me, okay?
No. It's
right?
Because
it's because you're the way you speak about these things, it's like you have to pay attention. You can't just you can't just
just shoot the breeze.
Yeah.
And talk about
you can't just pretend I'm listening. Yeah, exactly. Like thinking about where
I'm going
my
to ask you to be
later.
fully present with me, my dear.
I have to be, because it's like you're taking it back. But I feel like that's what we do, right? Like no one seems to be happy with where they are. They're always seeking for betterment. Like that's what personal growth really is though, right? Like you want to go from where you are to a better version of yourself, to a better version of yourself.
You can. And there's, I'm somebody who's ardently committed to doing, the best I can with this lifetime and accessing, realizing my potential. But there's different ways by which we move, right? So most people move because of fear and lack and scarcity, right? So there's something wrong. Mm-hmm. And so the person who goes to the gym and signs up at the beginning of the year and pays their $50 to $300 a month or whatever it is, is invariably being driven by something that they are not wanting. So most people's wanting, energy of wanting, it creates time, right? If I want something, then what I'm actually saying is I don't have it. So now I create time. So now I've got some sort of future idea of what it is that I feel will fulfill on, in this case, really a sense of accomplishment or peace. Oftentimes wanting is really, we just want relief from the suffering that we're in. So not wanting is usually the catalyst for wanting. So someone doesn't want to be out of shape. Someone doesn't want to be pre-diabetic. Somebody doesn't want to be obese. And so they're now, well, what I'm going to do is go to the gym and get a membership and a trainer. That's fine. They might get some results, but invariably they're being informed by what I call the negation, the not. So that wanting can get results. But invariably, they will fall by the wayside and they'll not show up after the first month or whatever it is, or they cancel the membership because it's not a creative form of desire. It's a reactive form. And when humans are reactive, we're actually holding on to something we don't want and trying to mitigate it or disprove it. So that's again, the slippery and insidious part of like the ego is it's like it knows relative to society, well, I don't look good right now and I want to be loved and accepted. That's one of the primordial imperatives of every human is I want to be loved and accepted because it goes back to that kid who felt they weren't. And so in order to do that, what do I have to do? Because I know who I am right now which isn't that I'm not loved and accepted by society, but I'm not loved and accepted by myself. And so then the exhausting game of trying to become who I think I need to be to garner that from outside, which will never work because you're not trying to get it from outside because everyone's playing the same game. If you think about it, it's kind of hilarious.
Should people get high before they listen to this episode so they can
I don't know if that will help, possibly.
I think so because I feel like they can really focus on this.
Yeah. I mean, many people do say that they have to listen to things, 4 or 5 times to really get it.
It makes perfect sense, but it's just like you're saying it so like matter of factly. But
because it's physics, right? And I've been doing this for 30 years. So for me, it's very clear. And I think, that's one of the reasons that people are drawn to and enamored with my work, because even if they can't keep track right now because they've got their own kind of fog of their own ego, they can hear the inherent truth about what I'm saying. It's not even my opinion so much as it's just the mechanics of what it is to be human.
No, it's 100% true.
Yeah.
It's about I think what I notice even with myself, it's not that I don't know. People I think intellectually or like just whatever, they know what they need to eat. They know what they have to do. But it's in the execution that everything falls apart, right? Because life, or like they rationalize it, or these blind spots. And so like how that to me is what the most interesting thing is. It's like you can see my blind spots, right? I can see your blind spot. Are you okay?
Yeah. Yes, you can. Okay, I'm happy to hear.
No. I would be able to if I spent like time with you, like I would come back and be like, oh, he has this, and this is his blind spot. But because this is probably I'm hyper. I think I'm observant and critical. I'm very critical. But does that mean if I'm a critical person that really I'm critical of myself?
100%.
And you're just mirroring whatever it is that.
Yeah, it's not only mirroring what you see for yourself, it's also mirroring the coping strategies that you've developed.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you become very astute. Like I would, if I were to put you in a general consensus, it's like a very easy label people have heard is like you're a perfectionist.
Yeah, but only with myself. I'm not a perfectionist with anybody.
That's where it all starts. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's all it starts.
But I notice everybody's like idiosyncrasies and like not just short. I notice everything, like how someone like uses their hand and twitches their foot, or how they're like looking at me, or if they're nodding and what they're thinking. Like my brain is constantly in a loop of that.
Yeah. So one level, you could look at that as a great asset. Like I have the same, right? So I make a distinction between being highly observant and being vigilant. Mm-hmm. They both carry the capacity to really be very present with your surroundings and be very aware. Like you've got this keen eye where you can notice, as you said, these little subtleties. I notice when someone's breathing pattern changes when I'm talking to them, right? So I can see different softness in their face, sometimes when they've sort of let go of a constraint. But being observant, most people are observant, but from a place of previous need to survive. So their powers of observation have got this underlying current of fear, and that's vigilance. So I would assert, not wrong or right, that much of your capacity to see things was, and maybe still is, informed a little bit by fear. where you're trying to get everything right, or you're wanting to have things a certain way.
Control, probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which again, control as a behavior is where there's an underlying feeling of insecurity, where you got hurt before when things were out of your control. So now I'm not going to be hurt again. So I'm going to make sure that I control everything that I can, which is really just perpetuating the previous hurt as opposed to experiencing the hurt, allowing it, and then stepping into what is literally a brand new day every day.
So like how do you walk through life then? Are you perfect now? No.
No, I don't even like the word. No, because again, I say, please don't become perfect. You'll have no one to relate to.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So
that's a adaptation. It's a strategy that the ego will use because the ego doesn't accept itself. I've gotten to a point where I'm just okay being me. And people are going to think whatever they want to think.
Yeah,
that's okay.
That's a great place.
And I'm compassionate. I'm loving. I'm kind. I don't in any way claim to be perfect in every arena of life. I'm sure, I've lost money on the stock market. I could have done better there. Am I really diligent all the time with my workouts? No, but I'm pretty damn good. There's going to be room for improvement in all areas of my life. I'm just okay with that, and I'm doing the best I can. So I embrace my humanity.
Right.
Which actually allows me, I think, to perform even better because I don't have these limiting feelings of inadequacy or judgment and self-pity and woe that a lot of people do where they beat the shit out of themselves because I should have done this, I'm like, no, I'm pretty chill.
You're pretty chill about that.
Yeah.
It's true because you seem pretty chill when you walked in here. Much more chill than I thought you were going to be. But then again, I barely know you. But
yeah.
Because you were telling about the buckets for women, where the patterns are. What are the buckets and patterns for men that you see a lot?
Well, I said women more about the insecurity. So men, it tends to be more about performance. For women, obviously, the primordial focus is on appearance and beauty, right? These are like deep in DNA, right? The prettiest girl wins the alpha male. So this is how you continue the species, right? This is deep DNA stuff. So for men, it's more around performance, right? Like whether that be sports, sex, business, money, that's where men struggle, right? Is that they're scared that they're not going to be doing something well enough. And so those are just big generalizations. But sometimes men can feel scared. I mean, I've helped a lot of guys who their dad was mercurial and really angry. And so they're scared too. They tend to cower if it's somebody of status or a boss or same thing. You can still have that same feeling of insecurity.
So how do you work with someone like that to kind of get over the need to outperform and...
But again, tracing it back to what is the underlying root narrative in their subconscious, where did that start? Where was the first time you thought that being you wasn't enough, or how you had to compensate was be the best or get the A or whatever it is? And so people can remember, sometimes they forget, but when I'm having a conversation with them, they'll remember, wow, I can, the first time I came home with my sister, my grade card, and she got all A's and I got a B, and my dad, I could see he was really disappointed. Something super benign.
Right.
But nonetheless, at that moment, that child decided that I'm less than my sister or my brother. And so from that moment forward, they've tried to not be less than, which of course reinforces less than. But the way that shows up in behavioral adaptations is hardworking, perfectionist, people pleaser, sort of now they've got adrenal fatigue, it manifests in the physiology over time.
Yeah.
So I would help them go back to that and say, okay, so at that moment, did it really mean that you were less than, or did it mean you got B's and they got A's? And so you start to separate emotion from fact, right? Which is where PTSD, where people associate a moment with how they felt versus allowing the moment to be the moment. My dad went to work and died, right? But for years, I had a story of loss, which no one would begrudge me. It made sense. But I didn't lose my dad died. Right. And so the story of loss impacted me, the truth of my dad dying, and I can still have grief. I miss the crap out of him. I know he'd be so proud of what I've accomplished in the world. These are all still legitimate, but I'm not losing anything anymore. Otherwise, it's a part of me that's gone. Right.
Yeah. It sounds like you do a lot of reframing and self-talk.
Reframing, and the self-talk is really a dissolution process of self-talk. I don't solve problems, I dissolve them is what I tell people. So people's problems sit on top of the narrative that is a confining space. So I reveal the confining space, and then the dissolution of that opens them up to a world of pure possibility.
It reminds me of a video I saw that I think was what came up on my feed that you did. Okay. Which was about love and falling in love.
Yes, that one went crazy. That's 6.5 million views or something.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it was so, that to me, it was so, the way it was worded was very interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was someone in my live event. So I work with people in the crowd, which is really fun. People I've never met before. I don't know what they're going to say. I've had someone who had chronic pain. I showed him he didn't. To someone who was a loser and was on heroin and in jail to realize he's not a loser. I mean, really moving stuff. And that woman, she was lovely. Juliana, I think her name is. But she was saying how she was 39 and worried about not finding love again. And she was talking about this one big love of hers when she was 20 and, never feeling like she could ever revisit that. And, so I was helping her see that she had collapsed love with the person, which we all do. Like, I'm in love with you and that person. And then if that person goes away, well, now I'm devastated. And so I just help people see, no, that person is extraordinary. And you might have hopefully a lifetime with them, maybe raise a family, and it's beautiful. But the love is yours. They might simply be the catalyst and the inspiration for it, just as the anger's yours, but they could be the inspiration for it. Like, you pissed me off. Well, no, they did and said what they did, and you had a reaction. So that completely changed her life, and apparently millions of others, where they're like, holy shit, like people who've just gone through a breakup, they're devastated, they're depressed, like, what's the point? It's like, oh, no, I had so much love. That's me. I can take that. Now, in theory, you can take it anywhere, but of course you're going to have preferences of the kind of people you want to hang out with. Like, I'm a super uber loving guy. Doesn't mean I want to spend the rest of my life with everybody, but I'm still the source of my love.
Well, yeah, I think the way it was worded or something was something to the effect that it's not that you were in love with him.
Yes.
Is that you were in love with the way it made you feel.
The version of you that you became through and with him.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's the journey of self-revelation and self-realization, is that life is revealing our own potentialities in all regards. It's not just love, although I would assert that's our predominant state.
Right.
But it's, you get pissed off with someone, see how angry you can get. Like, it's not because of them, it's who you became through and because of them in terms of that energy. But it's still yours. And so that then introduces responsibility that most people don't want. Because again, going back to what I said earlier, most people are at the effect of life. Well, no, I'm happy because I got good news from so-and-so. I'm pissed off because of what my wife or husband said. I'm angry because, no, then you're a victim of circumstance.
Right. So you're saying that when we start putting things on the external only, that's not, we can't define ourselves or our happiness or or sadness based on outside.
You can, but you're going to be left unfulfilled and feeling hopeless, because then that's when you become a control person, freak, whatever word people want to use.
Yeah.
Because you're saying, well, it's ipso facto, right? If I feel hurt or happy by my environment, I'm going to do everything I can to control the environment so that I manage my emotions. That's an exhausting way to try and manage yourself. If I can learn to be okay with whatever's happening, at peace with life, I've won.
Right. And you have to, I guess you have to practice that.
Well, awareness and practice, they're the two main buckets. I said, most people just aren't aware, so that's why I have compassion. I say you can't be held accountable for that which you're oblivious to. So people are judgmental of someone who's smoking cigarettes. Well, yeah, the world knows cigarettes are bad, but that person's still doing it. It's not like they're like, oh, I can't wait to have a cigarette because I know it's great for my vitality. They're still in some form of suffering, and the cigarette is their mechanism of relief, and now it's become a habit. But they're not aware of why, because underneath it, they feel like they're a piece of shit, or nobody loves them, or, that's the suffering. That's the real addiction, is the idea of our own inadequacy is the addiction. Then whatever shows up on top of that, pick your poison.
Right.
Yeah. But if you can get out of that, then you're free. You can be okay with whatever. That's why my main product is freedom.
Freedom. It makes perfect, because everyone wants to feel freedom.
Yes, but they're under the impression freedom will come when they perfect their circumstances.
Right. It's like, it's basically like a loop. It's an exhausting loop.
Exhausting.
Because I think also it's like your behavior is a product of what your subconscious thinks.
Yes.
It's not just, you're not just acting willy-nilly.
No, that's why the quote again, Carl Jung, is so beautiful, because he said, until you make the unconscious, I call subconscious, conscious, it will drive your life, meaning it's what's informing, but you'll call it fate.
Right. Okay.
So all behavior, like I said earlier, the words that you say are being, the genesis of them are these blind spots. So we think, oh, it's just bad luck. No, it's the energetic signature that you occupy and the way that you see yourself at the deepest level that creates your energetic way of relating to everything in life. So there's no coincidence.
Is this like frequency and vibrate?
Everything is frequency and vibration, language, words, and even Tesla said, right? You want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Yes.
So how can you change, and how does someone change that frequency or that energy?
By recognizing if they're living in a prison based on linguistic, like what I call prisons, right?
You say you have 10 of them too, right?
Yes, but it gets more complex. And
oh God.
Yeah. Well, because each one has got a shadow side too. So I give you an example.
Yeah.
So someone who thinks they're not good enough, typically that becomes an adaptive way as a coping strategy. So if someone is in an environment where they think they're not good enough, fill in the blank. Because one of my baseball players, he could go 4 for 5 in a baseball game, which is amazing. He got 4 hits out of 5 at bats.
It's amazing.
But he was still miserable in the locker room. People don't understand why. Because as a kid, his dad would always tell him, well, what happened to the 5th at bat? Right. So that's still the continuation of that feeling that he still wasn't enough. So for most people in the realm of I'm not enough at the deepest level, that will inform perfectionism, people pleasing, hard work, A-type drive, that people are trying to compensate for. So if I'm not something, typically the way that the brain reacts to that is I'll try and become something. Do you see? So I'm not something because that's something, you want that, you want to be good. So I'm not that. Again, people aren't thinking I'm not good. They're thinking all sorts of things like, why can't I get a raise? Or why am I not making enough money? Or why can't I attract a good mate? That's all on top of the feeling of inadequacy. So then it's the compensations to become good or better. The darker side of I'm not good enough is I am bad. And that's typically where people have grown up in a little bit more of a harsh environment where they were dismissed or they were really treated like shit or they were around an alcoholic parent and they were beaten. And so sadly, although the not good enough can still be really painful and can lead to sickness and disease and dysfunction and all sorts, most people are at least striving to do better. Somebody who's I'm bad tends to really become the addicts and the sort of really self-defeating, homeless, eventually maybe like really destructive behaviors because you're saying I am something derogatory.
Right.
And so that's where it becomes, well, fuck it, and the woe, and then self-fulfilling prophecy of like, well, who gives a shit anyway? And that's where people can sabotage their lives to a really detrimental level.
What's another prison that you have?
I'm not loved. A lot of people have that one.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of people don't
I'm not lovable or I'm not loved?
It can be either or. Words can be very subtle in the way it lands for people, but it's basically the same phenomenon that I'm not accepted for who I am. So
what would be the shadow of that?
Think about it. Well, if someone is not loved, right? So wanting to be loved is, a good thing. But if you're not loved, what would be a darker side of that?
I'm not liked, I'm hated, or I'm not lovable.
Well, the darker side could be still as I'm not even wanted.
Oh, I'm not wanted. Okay.
So not loved. Okay, you can stay around as a kid and it's like, but you're not getting affection. Mum doesn't hold you. Dad doesn't tell you love you, doesn't acknowledge you. So that's a horrible feeling. But if a parent says, you were a mistake, which kids have heard, or they might even hear the dad over, like I had a friend of mine, she's a therapist, and these 2 girls wanted to go through all the transition bullshit, whatever, and wanted to be boys. And she fortunately helped them because they didn't. What had happened is they'd overheard their dad one day saying to the mum, I really wish I'd had boys. Which was for him a sort of just, who knows the context of their conversation, but those girls heard that. The interpretation is we're not wanted for who we are, but if we become boys, we'll be loved. That's how primal it is. Because if you're not loved, you get kicked out of the gang and you don't make it, right?
That's so interesting because especially what's going on with everything now.
Yeah.
It's madness.
Insane, yeah.
And so these things, that's why it's super dangerous of what's happening in our world right now, right? Because it could be something as primal as like
and
a
so
comment
subtle.
And so subtle, and no one's even thinking about that stuff.
Yeah, but it still comes down to this primal need as a human being to be wanted, to be loved and accepted, to be safe.
Is there an age where these things are really kind of implanted so deeply, or like can you like, for example, like 7 and under is when these things really become super impactful? Or
yeah, I mean, those formative years, because as I said, it gets really subtle. I say these are the constraints with which we arrive, which is just my take. People could argue the other way around, meaning that this dimension of planet Earth, being human, we're here to reconcile and transcend these limitations. So it's not because mum said or dad said. I would assert those souls wanted to have the experience of whatever that feeling of being dismissed or not wanted is, so that they could transcend it. But most people don't look at life that way. They just try and get rid of the pain, and that's why we have pick your poison, right? Like alcohol, food, sex, prescription drugs, street drugs,
soothing, whatever
it is, right? And so actually, for me, the opportunity that it is to be human is go, oh, I'm a boundless, limitless, timeless soul incarnated into this three-dimensional meat suit with a narrative that is based in some sort of limitation. And the game is, can I break free from that? That's the game. That to me is the purpose of life, is to break free from the limitations with which we arrived.
So when you had so for you, for example, and you had your mom die and you had your father die at such a young age, what was your story? Was that like, I'm alone,
Yes, it's all up to me as well, similar to the woman I said from my mastermind in Holland. I'm alone, and also a big story of loss. Anything that's of value to me is going to leave. So my very first girlfriend, I was like, I compensated. I was a good guy, but I was the perfect boyfriend.
Right. You went overboard.
But as a compensation, which eventually it's not going to work, right? She literally said, I feel suffocated by your love.
Right.
And I was like, what's the fucking problem? There's so much love. But then when I got it, which is my awakening to my own behaviors, that holy shit. Like, it wasn't real. It wasn't authentic. It was real, but it wasn't true,
So then how did you course correct? Are you in a relation? Are you like, do you have...
I could see that mechanism then. So once you see, again, it's a lie. So these prisons are lies. That's a key part of this conversation.
Yeah.
The I'm not enough isn't a truth. It's a lie. The I'm not loved is a lie. I'm not safe. They're all lies.
Right.
So that's what I'm doing, is I'm helping people see that. So for example, my live event last few days ago, this girl was wanting me to help her with her business. So just some random girl, she put her hand up. I said, who wants to chat? So I want you to help me in business. Okay, what's going on? And it turned out that when she was young, her dad said to her, you're going to turn out to be a loser just like your mom and your sister. Right. And so she'd held on to that. This is very articulate, successful coach. But I helped her point out that she can't actually help people because she's trying to perfect herself because she thinks she's a loser. But you see, if you hold on to a lie and then you're just trying to disprove it, all she keeps reinforcing is the lie. She said in front of everyone, it was comical, she said, she just saved me 12 grand. I was about to do this coaching program, which is another attempt at trying to finally perfect herself. So the lies, so now she felt relief. What was so powerful, she came up to me at the end of when everyone was breaking chairs and leaving. She came up and said, you're not going to believe this. Show me her phone. She said, there's a client that I've been trying to get since June of last year. They texted me literally as you and I stopped talking.
Really?
Because now she was available. There's nothing, she's not trying to perfect herself behind closed doors before she thinks she's ready for business. I said, one of the greatest qualities you can bring in your business is acceptance. Because everyone who comes to you has got the feeling of that there's something wrong with them too. But you're the authority here who's desperately trying to perfect yourself.
Exactly.
You're a disservice to the people, and that's why your business is not working. She was just blown away.
So you do all these live programs, basically.
Yeah, live events. Yeah.
Live events.
So the mastermind is more, it's online, people from all around the world, 3-month container. The live events are just fun where, we're going to grow. People have asked me now to travel around the world and do them. They're just really fun.
They are. I love this. Could you
come
do
to one.
I will. When's the next one?
March 20th.
And do a lot of, like, where is it at here?
Yeah, we've outgrown the space. It's I come into LA for it, and there's 200 plus people. It's intimate, but it's a good size. But now, we're looking at a bigger theater for 2,000 because we sell out within 24 hours.
You do?
Yeah. People are flying from all around the world. There were people from, this time there was someone from Australia and all from the East Coast. And yeah, it's really flattering.
And so do you spend the entire time, you say you give them some theory?
Yeah,
and
I
then
talk
you just
a little
pick
bit
people.
about whatever, and then I just say who wants to chat. So this time it was a girl who wanted me to improve a business. There's another woman who's turning 50 in a week who doesn't have a relationship, but she wants love. And part of our story is, she hasn't had many relationships. She's turning 50. So I hear all the data I need, right?
Yeah.
So immediately I say, what's the significance of you telling me that you're about to turn 50? Right? There's a story about that as to why she can't have a relationship. So we undo all of that. And then
I want to hear it. Undo it. I'm curious because I'm sure there are people who are listening who may be turning 50 or 40. And I feel like relationships is a biggie, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it's harder and harder for people to meet people here.
Yes.
Or not here, just in life.
Yes.
And with everything, with like with apps, social media, now AI, there's so many people that I think loneliness has become a massive, I think that's the real pandemic.
So I'm going to take something you said there because I think it will probably hit a chord with people. You said it's getting harder and harder for people to meet people.
Yeah.
Because they haven't met themselves.
That's interesting.
Do you get that?
I do get that.
See, it's harder for people to meet because the more you drift away from your authentic nature, the more of a facade you're carrying and the harder it is to sustain, and therefore the harder it is to have intimacy, intimacy. So this is what, and if people really want to watch it, I have a super affordable, my membership program is Freedom. It's $29 a month, and all my lives are in there. You pay more to go to the live than watching them free recorded. So if someone wants to watch that, and there's a 90+ hours of other content on anxiety, relationships, freeing your mind, depression, a wisdom library, so all the lives get put in there because not everyone can come. So it was a powerful conversation. But she sat there just beaming in joy because she realized being 50's got nothing to do with anything. The fact that she hasn't had many relationships got nothing to do with anything. And that she stepped into a whole world of possibility where I said, by the time you come here next month, you could have had probably 5 suitors come up to you if you want.
So what was it? If it wasn't the 50 and if it wasn't the fact that she hasn't had a lot of relationships, what was the reason why she was saying that in the first place?
Because she had at a young age learned to self-soothe because her parents weren't available, and so she'd become fiercely independent. And what was so funny, and people cracked up because for some reason when I do my lives I turn more into the comedian, and so she says, it's so funny, she says, I do heart-centered workshops.
Are you serious?
So I was taking a piss because, of course, I'm coming from a loving place. I'm like, I can just see that. Okay, everybody drop into their heart, and like this is all about love. And I said, and then you leave and go back to your hotel room and cry by yourself.
But this is
But that's what she did as a kid. So she's so scared to make herself so vulnerable, which again that's why I get it. It's scary. I have compassion, but that's where people haven't met themselves to love themselves. Same with the girl who's trying to perfect herself before she thinks she's a good enough coach. Now I'm like, you'll be the best coach in the world if you could just accept yourself and tell people to get over themselves. That's all they want.
Well, I totally agree. But this is why I said it earlier about the psychologist, right? Like, I find like a lot of times, like, people are not comfortable of just being authentic. Truly, the word authentic is thrown around all the time. Right? Like authenticity, all these things. It's like great hashtags. But the truth is, nobody's really comfortable in just being who they are.
Being completely honest.
Just being different, because different is not, for whatever reason, it's not accepted. People think it's not accepted.
Yes.
But the truth is, I think the more different you are, the more you're more likable, not less likable.
Because it's a magnet. Like you think about if you had this really beautiful gala, everyone's in their like black tie and it's all fancy schmancy and everyone's sipping on their champagne flutes or whatever. And you throw in a 4-year-old kid who's running around and he's got shit all over his face.
Yeah.
Like it's adorable and people are drawn to that because it's freedom. That's why my product's called Freedom. So for me, if you want to take the world right now of like just insane amounts of mental health issues, the precursor to all of that is the absence of self-love. Because then I'm in dis-ease with myself. So then that's just going to spill out into the world.
But I feel like also people just, besides self-soothing, everything is basically a distraction now. If people are, the mental health, as you were just saying, anxiety, depression, suicide, all of it is becoming worse and worse because social media, comparing yourself to some other life that doesn't even actually really even exist.
No.
And people are using these all, and they're becoming, it's becoming worse. And instead of like, and even though going on social media is why they're depressed, they can't seem to take themselves off because they need it as a distraction away from their own life.
So it's fueling all of these mechanisms where fundamentally someone is just simply not at peace with themselves. So it's this exogenous form of searching for some reconciliation. If I find the right person, if I have enough money, when I get my body right, when I start my business, when I get the dream home, forget about it. Then I'm going to be awesome. But no, because you're awesome now. You're awesome now. Everybody is. Like literally everyone right now, I'd say everyone is a masterpiece and a work in progress.
At the same time.
So can you be completely at peace where you are, no matter the size waist you have or whatever it is you're going through, even as a sickness, with whatever your bank account says, however dysfunctional or great your relationship, can you find peace with what is? That's the only way you can move forward to something that you might have as an aspiration, simply for the pure exploration of what life is.
I'm gonna actually listen to this podcast myself to make sure I understand, so I can I get like the whole thing. So I just want to go back to you for a second.
Sure.
So, because when you did that movie Heal, the
Yeah,
documentary, so what was that? What would you consider? What kind of expert were you in that?
That was the mind architect, but I spoke so part of my background is in Ayurveda, which is a healing arm of yoga. So like Chinese medicine, which itself is fascinating.
Fascinating.
So I use that for, like, I'm still here in a 3-dimensional meat suit. There's still things that I do to take care of myself.
Yeah.
But internally, my terrain.
A meat suit, did you call it?
Yeah. 3-dimensional meat suit. People become misidentified. Like they say, I am a certain weight. I am a certain height. No, you're not. Because you're the you that has been consistent even when you were like 3 foot as a kid and whatever weight you had or lost, right? If anything can change, then that's not the real you, right? So that's an access point to realizing, I've become misidentified with form, and then even the subtler form, which is the thoughts in your head. So that's where I'm helping people to disassociate from, to become free from. Like a radio station in your head, just 24/7, usually nonsense, right? But most people believe it. And if you can start to create a bit of space from that, like, I forgot who it was, Aristotle or someone said it's the mark of an intelligent mind that can entertain a thought without believing it, right? So you can have the thoughts of like, I'm an idiot. I don't know, am I an idiot? Like, versus just saying like a declaration of fact.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm helping people understand is the power of the words that they create the reality and the confines you live within.
So then they have to stop they have to stop doing certain behaviors and saying certain things to themselves.
They don't have to, but that would happen. Ideally, it would happen automatically when you realize that what's been driving your behavior isn't a truth, right? So it's, again, I say I dissolve problems. Solution-based world that we live in is like, okay, you have anxiety. Well, this is what you have to do. Right, you go and see an expert. Typically, they traffic in the world of behavior, right? Don't do this, don't do that.
Right.
But I don't. I'm not interested. Behavior is a byproduct of your feelings and then your thoughts, and then underneath your thoughts, subconscious. So changing behavior, it might work for a while, but if you're human, you know how hard that is to freaking sustain.
Yeah.
Because you're being driven by deeper code that has you think the thoughts you have, feel the way you feel, and then make choices to act.
Yeah.
So unless you undo that deeper code, which is what I'm talking about,
I know.
Then you're going to, if you have willpower, you'll keep up the new behaviors for a while. If you don't, you say, fucking go back to the cigarette and that therapist was a piece of shit anyway. You'll come up with a justification.
100%. And that's why willpower that never works anyway. It's a muscle that will get tired.
Especially as you get older, because you're not going to have the same sort of level of, like tenacity or cavalier attitude of fuck you, or eventually your dad's going to die and now you've got no one else to make wrong. It's like until you fall flat on your face again. So that's why I want to be informed by love and freedom versus like love and limitation, fear and limitation.
Do you believe in like that? I said earlier, like hypnosis or breath work or any type of like, how about like psychedelics to get you into that place in your head?
I think they all have a place, and people, whatever journey they're on and wherever they're at and the people they draw into their life, it might be appropriate. I think things like breath work, I think psychedelics help because that's going to get deeper, right? Breath work can be transformative. You can have a powerful moment, especially if you're doing deep holotropic breathing.
It's hard.
It is hard, but a lot of people go into the crepitus and they have these epiphanies, and that's great. But oftentimes, anything that we're doing it's too late, right? What I'm interested in, just my own modality, is revealing these deep subconscious constraints for what they are, which is lies. When you see it for what it is, a lie, then you're never going to be the same person. As an analogy, right? For 2,000 years, we have said the world is a globe. And I guess still people arguing that it's not, which is fine. That's a whole different conversation. But let's just go with it. We're on a sphere, right? But prior to that, prior to Galileo, I think he decided, or he saw that it's a sphere. Everyone thought it was flat. So that is the prison, right? The flat, because it's a lie. But in that prison, it's appropriate for what? The fear of falling off the edge. Do you see that fear is commensurate with the perspective? So you could say, okay, well, what's your gadget for stopping people falling off? That's a solution, right? If I was Elon Musk back in the day and I had a laser bracelet that would detect how far the horizon was, I'd be a multi-billionaire.
Yeah, no kidding.
But it would all be within a lie, because now I work with MBA guys who, like, I tell an MBA, try and fall off the planet. Like, and they jump high.
Exactly.
Give it 4 seconds, they're right back. Right?
Yeah.
So that you start to realize, so then when you reveal the lie, the previous fear associated with it disappears. Do you see? So does that as an analogy help you understand? So if someone thinks they're not enough, and as a byproduct of that, they had Hashimoto's, which is down the line of them trying to be a perfectionist and working too hard,
right?
And I could say, well, what you need to do is some breath work, meditation as a solution, but they're still being driven by the deeper code that they're not enough.
Yeah.
Once they see that for what it is, oh, my dad said da-da-da, my sister and my brother was the athlete, or whatever the justification was. So does that mean like truly you're not enough? No, it's made up. Holy shit, if I'm not enough, then I say in the absence of that constraint, like literally stepping out of prison, how would you feel? What become available? Oh my God, that's when the shoulders drop. I'd do anything. That's a new world. Then I don't need to tell them what to do. They start to look through new eyes, which will generate different behavior.
And so, do you see that? Yeah, I do understand.
It's like going to a different planet, like Wakanda or whatever it was in Black Panther.
Yeah.
So you go through a portal. In this case, the portal is dissolving your constraint. You suddenly enter this world of pure love and freedom and possibility. You don't know how to navigate it, like the girl from Holland, which is cool. She's like, I don't even know what to do here. I'm like, no, I know. That's what I say to people, even in my mastermind. I'm introducing you to a world with which you're not familiar.
Yeah.
But at least you're out of fucking hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we can start to explore who could you be if you're not trying to disprove some feeling of inadequacy? Who could you be if you're not always worried about whether you're going to make it or be safe? Oh, fuck. I don't know. I'd be so free. I'd start my business. I'd take better care of myself. I'd probably sleep like a baby. And, there's all these different experiences that now become available in this new dimension.
So in this new dimension, but how many of the people that you work with fall back into old patterns, old routines?
For sure. I mean, I don't keep track of the thousands of people, but, for people who are committed to my work, most of them for sure are going to have glimpses, myself included. I'm at the bow of the boat of this whole work, at least in my way of sharing it and teaching it. So I can still, have, an old feeling of whatever it is, very short-lived now. But yeah, it takes practice. And also it takes community, it takes environment, right?
Community is a big one.
Because if you're in a world where you're constantly being reminded of everybody's shortcomings, or you even hear your friends complaining about their marriages and their kids or their business, you're in the mire of like derogatory negative comments, right? Versus in part of my Freedom membership, there's a community where people support each other with the same kind of conversations. So that itself can be uplifting.
Yeah.
So yes, you need practice, you need time, you need support, you need reinforcement, and there's many layers to it. So even if somebody in my mastermind, like this woman, realizes it's all up to her and now realizes it's just not up to her.
Right.
Like, okay, maybe the predominant onus is on her, but as a choice, not like a have to. It's a very different energy. She gets to be a mum. She loves to be a mum. Do you see the difference between it's all up to me and I have to do it? That's creating suffering and resistance. So it's a choice. And when you introduce choice, you now have freedom.
I don't, okay, I have a friend, oh my God, a couple weeks ago, I was out for dinner and I'm like, I gotta go. I have to put my kids to bed. And he told me this whole big thing about like how he has this spiritual advisor who said to him that and then he relays to me, he's like, oh no, Jennifer, you can't say you have to put your kids to bed. You have to say, I get to put my kids to bed. I'm like, so like this language, I find like it all sounds dandy and fine, but it feels very contrived and weird.
It can do, yes.
Right. Like, so I'm like, okay, well, I got to leave because I get to put my children to bed or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like a whole different language language that you have to learn.
It is. And if it's done that way where his spiritual counselor is telling him to, then it's just another thing for him to do, which is only going to create more pressure.
Well, if he's embodying it, but when he says it to me, it feels very like,
it's instructional. So there's a difference between what I call instruction and inspiration. If he's saying, you have to say, well, it's still, I have to, it's still the same energy.
And also now all I do is just laugh, like mock him. I'm like, every time he calls me, I'm like, oh, I get to, I get to like do the chores I have to do, or I get to.
I can't wait to do the dishes.
Yeah, I get to do the dishes.
Again, you want to be careful that it doesn't become too fastidious in terms of, we're human, right? We're all doing the best we can. And that's where I think we can make space for a bit of comedy, a bit of compassion, of like, these are good things to understand so
Yeah.
that you can have a deeper reference point of like, oh, okay, yeah, at times my kids have been a pain in my ass and I'm just going to put them to timeout or bed. You know, you're human, you're a mum, you're doing the best you can.
Right.
But if you can at least revert back to at some point in your evening or the next day, go, okay, that was an emotional reaction, totally appropriate as a human. I don't want to live from there because it's tiring. I
Yeah.
also don't want to be that person for my kids. And maybe there's an opportunity for a conversation where they can garner a bit more responsibility about the way they behave. You know, you want to just come back to it. Otherwise, it's accumulative over time.
I know. I guess like you don't know me at all. I know. I understand that. But like I laugh about a lot of people who, and maybe that you're going to say because I'm overly critical, perhaps, but about manifestation. Like I'm manifesting this. I'm gonna
spiritual world of
woo-woo I'm gonna woo-woo. Yeah, like and I'm like the anti.
Yes, you're super practical.
I'm super practical.
Yeah, same. I'm a Virgo.
I'm a Virgo too.
Yeah.
When's your birthday?
September 10th.
September 16th.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm a Virgo, and I like things that are like, you know, practical, right? Like I'm not gonna like just think myself into getting what I want. You know, I'm gonna chase what I want.
Yes.
And then, so then the manifestation people are like, you don't chase, you wait, you hold space, and it comes to you. But
so for me, it's always both.
Okay, so how does it? Where does
it's not either or? Like the brain thinks in terms of duality: good, bad, right, wrong. You know, and that's why people tend to go, well, if a relationship doesn't work, it's like fuck it. You know, it's like everything tends to be a bit too reactionary. And what about if it could just be both? Recognize that we're frequency-based beings, you know, and that our energy does have like that girl who's talking to me in a live, her phone's off.
Right.
She turns her phone off at the end, sees what time we finish, and woo-woo, you know, hey presto abracadabra, this fucking client who she's been trying to get for 7 months shows up. There's something in that.
Yes, and I believe in that.
Yeah. So she now energetically has stepped into a different iteration of herself that isn't in this world of there's something wrong with me and I have to constantly perfect myself. So the way I would phrase it is she became more available to life, which is where life then met her at a different vibration. Now, can she just sit around and go, oh, I'm at this new vibration? No, she has to reply to the person, say, great to hear from you. I'd love to work with you. And then whatever the next steps would be for this new type of person, she also has to be proactive in.
Right, right. You know, so you think it's a combination of both.
My friend in college, he had a great expression because I started all of this philosophizing at a very young age. And he and I would sit under a tree and talk about consciousness. And it was fun as 18, 19-year-old punk kids.
Yeah.
But he would say, you know, believe in Allah, but tie up your camels.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. No,
So that to me kind of captures it, right? Like, you know, like there's whether you call it God or Jesus or Muhammad or whoever or fucking Buddha, that's great. Have your dogmas. I'm not going to poo-poo you for it. And, you know, be as responsible you can be as a co-creator in life.
Yes.
So that's where the woman who's, okay, she's a single mom, but she has community and an ex and parents. You know, she's not fully alone, but she could also say, okay, maybe life will bring me some unexpected lover or a friend or a neighbor who loves kids in the next 3 or 4 weeks. You know, be open to the miracles too.
100%.
We tend to default to it's all up to us, and for that reason, you know, fuck life and woe is me. You know, it's like I think we can make room for both.
I think you can, but like you see very much because I was actually very nervous. But I started this podcast by saying I was a little nervous because before I met you, because I thought you were going to be way more woo-woo.
Yeah.
You know?
No.
But you're not so woo-woo. You're like, you seem to be like very much
super down to earth. To me, you know, again, going back to the monikers at the beginning, a spiritual teacher, I'm actually more of a physicist, right?
Yeah.
But my physicist lens incorporates code, right? So I'm more of a tech guy also, but even with your mind, right? Because it's programming. So that's not woo-woo, because if you're living in a world where you think that you're not enough, that's a physical piece of code.
Yes, 100%
you know?
agree.
So I could then attribute what people might think as woo-woo as to why do they keep attracting a partner who's emotionally unavailable or maybe even a little abusive. Oh, that's not woo-woo. You know, they just need to move to a better city or something. Well, no, to me, it's more, no, it makes sense. Energetically, if the way they view themselves is less than, they're going to attract woo-woo people who will mirror that.
Yeah.
So I'm not, I understand the whole world of vibration and quantum physics and all of that, but to me, it's very practical.
Yeah.
It really is. It seems like miracles, like that girl got this text, or, the other things that have transpired with the myriad of people that I've helped. Like some woman had stage 4 endometriosis, gone a couple of months after the end of the mastermind. That's not woo-woo. That's freaking science.
But why is that? Because she let
go of
all
in her world, her needs don't matter. Because she grew up as a kid where her needs weren't met. She wasn't given any attention.
Right.
So especially as a woman, then her system's shutting down. Her needs don't matter. Whatever she wants is really irrelevant.
Right. So it manifests physically.
And she attracted boyfriends who would never pay her the time of day or were abusive. And eventually it shows up physiologically. Yeah, the mind and body connection is not so much a connection as it's a continuum.
Yeah, it's a continuum. I would agree with that for sure.
So if you're living in a state of stress, I mean, you talk to any real far scientist who's like, no, unless there's actual evidence and, a documented study, they're still going to say stress is the number one cause of death, right? Or disease.
Yeah, stress for sure.
So what's stress? It's the way you're relating to your environment, which is based on perception.
Yeah.
So if you can change the eyes with which you view the world, then you're going to change your physiological response to it. That's not woo-woo, that's physics.
That's physics. Hold on, I think I have another question. Just want to make sure before I... Hold on a minute, because I don't want to...
That's where Wayne Dyer had a great quote. He said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
I love that. Yeah. Hold on.
Is it because they changed, or is it because I have a new view?
It's because you have a new view.
Physics talks about the observer effect. The split, the electron test with the two split tests. Whether it's a wave or it's particles. All of it. This is all physics. So if you're the observer in a particular environment, you're going to see the way that you see. And then you're going to therefore impose your particular vantage point on a circumstance while someone else would have seen something completely different. Yet it's the same environment. Ramana Maharshi, one of the greatest spiritual teachers, or in terms of legacy, he would say people would come to his ashram for satsang, which is where they'd come and listen and ask questions, and he'd sit there and do his best to answer. And he said, it's like people arrive with a palm full of gunpowder. Some people's gunpowder is completely submerged with water. And for some other people, it's damp. And for some other people, it's really bone dry. And he says, I'm saying the same thing to the whole group. But depending on their capacity to hear, it will elicit the kind of response they have. The person who's got completely submerged might go, it's kind of interesting. I didn't get much from it. They did, but they're not aware of it yet. The person with bone dry gunpowder has the biggest epiphany. Same thing, but depending on the readiness of someone's consciousness, you're going to interact with life at that level.
I like that. It's so true. That is so true.
Yeah, so that's the beauty of whether we call it karma or whatever this incarnation is about, that you're going to have to revisit the different arenas of life, those buckets we talked about. Why does a girl continue to attract a guy that's not emotionally available or was a bit abusive? She's the consistent theme. Maybe, just maybe, she's got some story of she's not lovable or she's trash, and so she keeps attracting guys and circumstances to reflect that until she transcends that. She goes to a different timeline because she's now viewing herself differently, feeling differently, and as a result, life will present new circumstances.
Right. So
that's physics.
She changes the pattern herself because she's otherwise living it over and over again until you learn it for yourself.
Yes. And then most people live the other way around, where they think, I want to change my circumstances before I'll change.
Right. But you follow yourself wherever you go.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's called seeing is believing, which I say is also called waiting.
Seeing is believing.
Is also called...
It's called waiting. Yes. I love your wordsmithing or your analogies or your word stuff. Yeah. You do that all the time, huh?
All the time, because it helps people understand something that's kind of otherwise a little bit over their head. Like you said, you got to really focus when you're talking to me. Yeah.
Because it's not what I normally talk about, right? So, and I have to just kind of pay attention, Yeah. I can't just interject with something because it's...
Just cash this one in and just
I cannot cash this one. I got to be
well, good. I'm glad that you're on your A game here.
I have to be. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Because I know you, I'm trying to think of some... What do people ask you about, layman's people like me, that, what's the most common question that they would ask you?
I mean, they run the gamut, as you said, usually in the arena of relationships, something to do with, relationships, health, and wealth. They're the big buckets, right? They're the real main three.
What's the main? Give me one question in each that they ask the most.
Health tends to be specific to whatever someone's dealing with, right? So, why have I created, or why do I have this particular sickness? And so I love to make the correlation for people between dis-ease and disease. So disease being the physical manifestation over time of dis-ease, which is the absence of ease. Meaning if my system's not at peace, then just again, biologically, I'm going to be in the sympathetic part of my autonomic nervous system, meaning I'm in fight or flight because I'm not at ease. When we're at peace, we're in the parasympathetic, which is rest and digest and rejuvenate, right? So that's just physics again. But if the way I perceive my environment is I'm scared or I'm like under stress, then my biology has to follow that. So then dis-ease, absence of ease, so just even understanding that cascade, regardless of what you're dealing with, can help people to be more responsible about, okay, in ways that I don't know how they have to manage it, whether they get out of a narcissistic, horrible relationship, or they leave a toxic job, or they just need to learn to take time and breathe and have a better sleep routine or meditate, just to imbibe ease more in your system and see what your body does. That's one.
Yeah.
Relationships, again, are going to be the reflection of your relationship with yourself. So if you're in a place where you think you're not safe, then you're always going to see something your partner does as potentially threatening. If you think that you're not enough, you're always going to see something your partner does as a judgment of you. So it's all a mirror. The whole life and the dimension of time and space and people is all just a mirror. So again, that's the good news. It's the good news and the bad news, because most people don't want to be that responsible. Yeah, but I'd rather blame my husband.
Yeah, it's much easier. Yeah, exactly.
Seems that, but in the long term, it's not, because you're actually slowly killing yourself. Wow. That's what I thought was really funny. The Dutch girl, the woman, she said, holy shit, when she realized her mechanism for survival, which is it's all up to me, which is the white knuckling of I've got to take care of everything. She said, I realized the way that I'm surviving is actually what's killing me.
Right. Is that always, though, the way it is?
Everyone. But it was just beautiful that she could see it unprompted by me. That's what happens when the lights go on in the back room. You're like, holy shit, I've been doing this since I was a kid. And so she thinks that she's doing something from a smart place of like, well, it's all up to me, so I'm going to push through. But actually, that's a lie. And the mechanism she's using is what's actually her uncoming.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like that's a blind spot, though, right? Like
it is,
right? Because usually your best quality tends to also be your worst quality.
Yes, they're two sides of the same coin, and that's why I said we can't be held accountable for that which we're oblivious to. That's where compassion comes in, right?
Yeah.
Because people can be very self-righteous when they see what's going on, and that doesn't help. It's about just being kind and realizing everyone's doing the best they can within the limits of their awareness. But
yeah.
So then for the wealth, for the other bucket, to finish the answer to your question, most people, I'll give one example. I was talking to someone I met briefly, and she's a single mom too. And she's like she said, I'm in a great place with my kids and my energy, and I feel really good with my health and her choices around food and da-da-da. And she said, now I'm ready to create abundance, which all sounds beautiful, and that fits into the whole world of spirituality. And I said, well, therein lies your problem. She's like, what do you mean? I said, you don't create abundance, you reveal it. Abundance is. So what we want to do is actually, instead of trying to create it, we want to dissolve what is your illusion that you can't access it.
God, Jesus! I mean, I'm telling you, I need a hard drink after I speak to you. I don't even drink. Does everybody say this to you? Like, who are you friends with? Like, who are your friends?
Yeah.
Are your friends like you?
Some of them are, yeah. I mean, I'm on a show with you. I want to obviously give as much, content that it's valuable to your listeners.
No, I think it's amazing.
But I shoot the shit. I play golf and tennis.
You're like a normal.
Around.
You're like a regular. You talk about normal things too.
Of course. But I also understand the mechanics of how life works, and so it's fun because then I get to create and make shit up and play in the world that is this rich tapestry called, planet Earth.
But do you have most of your friends like that you hang out with? Do they think at your level of consciousness?
Maybe not in this regard, but they have their own levels of expertise. I have friends who are great musicians or great playwrights, and like everyone's got their own different qualities.
Yeah, of course. I'm kind of teasing you, but
yes, I get it, and I appreciate the compliment. But I guess I have a unique ability to understand the power of language and to, discern in a very precise way, making things that are otherwise profound palatable for people.
Yeah, like
or not so palatable.
Or not palatable. Like, so you can't even say create, because that means that you're thinking that you don't have it's not there in the first place.
Correct. So you're under the illusion that something's missing, right? Isn't it subtle?
It's so
subtle, but it's so profound. Like often people will say my stuff, God, it's so simple, but it's really not easy.
It's not exactly. Well, that's the thing. Like as you talk this whole, however long it is, I have no idea how long you've been here. How long have we been doing this? Probably
about an hour and a half.
Oh, geez, I'm so sorry. Okay, we're gonna wrap. But
That's
like,
fine by me.
I'm thinking like, okay, what am I doing what am I doing in my life that's holding me back that I'm not even aware of?
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And you will be. And that's okay. You're human.
Right? And like, where am I blind? Like, I think that, I'm so I think, my EQ's so great. Like, but I know my blind spots. But as I'm talking to you, I'm like, I bet you there's so many things that I have no idea. I'm a total mess. And I don't even know it.
I was feeling great before Peter Crone.
Exactly. I was super confident.
You're awesome. No, I can tell. And I could guess, you're in the same bucket of a lot of my clientele who are high-end performers. But there's usually just this unnecessary pressure, the world of have to, like your friend, albeit perhaps not in that arena. If I get to, I could see that you would perhaps, take that with a pinch of salt. But, the feeling of you have to, like, like that you put a lot of pressure on yourself. And there might be just a little bit more room for Jennifer to have a bit more freedom, a bit more joy, not take life so seriously, and to just have a bit more ease about you and allow life to contribute to you as much as I'm sure you contribute to others.
Yeah, that's actually, I think a lot of people would probably fit into that bucket. I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
Yeah. And I'm guessing just because of who you are, the majority of your audience is probably women. They're probably very smart women. They're probably, as you said, higher EQ. They're movers and shakers. They probably have families, but they also have businesses, whether they're, really committed or it's a hobby, whatever. But they're dynamic women, right? Extraordinary women. And typically in that realm, what I see is where there's become a little bit of an exaggeration of the masculine qualities, of being a little bit too driven, which can start to infiltrate the relationship. So maybe they've even attracted a man who perhaps isn't so much of a man, and he's become an extension of their children, in the way that they have to manage or take care of them. So they maybe haven't made room for the softness of the feminine, without getting into goddess language or any of that.
No, but you're right. I've done a thing on, first of all, just to kind of let you know, I have a 50-50 split. Like a lot of my audience is men.
Okay, cool.
So that's the first thing. But I was going to say, I've done other people's podcasts, not on this podcast so much, where I talk about that.
Yeah.
Where I find that a lot of times, if you're a strong woman or you're successful, it can bleed into being masculine energy, which then is kind of like a turnoff if you're trying to like attract a very alpha type of man.
Yeah.
And so it's a very delicate balance.
It is. It's tough.
Yeah.
Really, and I feel for both men and women, because men oftentimes, the little boy syndrome that's out there, they're trying to do the best they can to compensate, which is really not being a man at all. Being more of a man is like, I struggle in this arena, and just owning it, right?
But I think that a lot of women are single who are very successful because they unfortunately, they're either too much in that masculine energy, but they don't see that, right? And then they put on this facade like, I don't need a man, or I don't want a man, and that becomes their like playbook. That becomes their talk, right? And the guy that they actually want a girl who's more feminine, and so it becomes this very, very difficult dance that happens.
Yeah, no, I see it. And it's there's no simple answer, right? It comes back to choice, right? For a woman who's driven, who's intelligent, who sees the world of possibility, and this world has become so much more accessible for all of us, right? Whether it's travel or business or startups or investments, it's like it's fun to be able to, but it's how can you maintain that sense of enthusiasm and drive while simultaneously embodying the softness, the approachability, and the nurturance of a woman, right?
Yeah.
And that's I'm not saying that's easy. Equally for men who can now also be more sensitive. Like I make my own skincare products, right? I make a sugar scrub. Like I love...
Who does?
I do.
You do?
Yeah. So because I like to take care of myself, right? But I'm also like, I like to be a fucking man's man, and I want to be with a woman who's not, trying to outperform me or something. It's like...
But like to me, that's like that. I think that's what happens, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It becomes competitive.
Yeah. And that's, again, coming from fear. It's coming from fear.
Yeah.
And ironically, the means by which we're trying to garner attractivity, or becoming attractive to somebody is the obstacle to it, right? So the woman oftentimes felt the need to become strong because she felt either inadequate or insecure, not safe. And so, okay, well, if I'm going to make it, I need to make sure I'm financially independent and and all of these things. Nothing wrong with that method, but it makes you unavailable, right? Because now you've actually strengthened the independence as opposed to creating, some sort of companionship or a partnership.
Totally.
And then the boy or the man, who's now trying to disprove he's like weak or trying to become the alpha, trying to become strong, is really constantly reinforcing that he's not, which is equally unattractive to a woman.
100%.
Because
that's why people who are like, for women anyway, you need to have a guy who's like super, truly confident, who's truly like, it's that they're not intimidated by you, that they're not like, they don't feel like you're emasculating them because of your whatever you have, it's very difficult. It's a very delicate balance.
Yeah. Interesting times. And so again, it comes down to awareness. It comes down to patience. It comes down to compassion with each other.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I've got this strong tendency to be driven and independent as a woman. And I know that's going to be both unattractive to you, but also maybe at times challenging.
But I have to say, there's like a lot of guys who actually like it. And it's or rather have a girl who's like that. But there is like a body of men who that's what they're not. They don't need another dude. They don't need to be dating another dude.
No.
Right? They want to have someone who has the softness.
Yeah.
And I talk about this all the time with people, like all the time, because it's I know I got to wrap this up here.
That's okay. No, but I think it's where we can have more patience and compassion with ourselves and others, that we're all doing the best we can with the limits of our awareness, and just to be aware even of your tendencies and share those. That's a form of intimacy, right?
Totally.
Like to be able to say, hey, that I have this particular idiosyncrasy, and I know that could be a turn off, but I at least want to be open, and that softens it immediately once you can talk about it.
I think so. I think once anything is out in the open, it like that you become more vulnerable. That's attractive also, right?
Yeah, it really is.
I think so. Oh my God. Well, Peter, thank you for being here. I know you're moving away. I won't say where. Is it like a secret?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. Well, I'm not going to say where it is. He's going to Mars. No, I'm just kidding. So I really do. I appreciate you coming on this before you leave town. When do you leave?
Within the next 2 weeks, so pretty soon. But I come back and forth. I wasn't based here, but I still come in and out of LA. So I was up in the Tahoe region, as mentioned. So now, but I come in and do my live events. So if anyone wants to come to one of those, they can find that on my website. I
want to come to one of them. I want to see you in action. I want to see you do these things.
Fun. Yeah. It'll help put it into perspective.
100% it will. I would love,
because then you experience it vicariously. Like, a number of people who come up to see me after, they're like, oh my God, I could see myself in all 3 or 4 of the people you spoke to.
And I can see that you're good at it, because you can, it comes naturally for you, like, I think it's a gift that you probably, obviously you have, right? Like you pick up on something and then you just kind of keep on going with it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've done, I can imagine you probably really helped a lot of people.
Seems that way. It's certainly the people that come up to me or stop me on the streets or send messages. It's very, very flattering and humbling. So yeah, I'll keep at it.
Please. I think you're onto something there. I think you're onto something.
Ending human suffering. Okay.
I like that, and freedom. I love it all. Where can people find your Instagram? Is the best place to see you? Or?
Yeah, on social, Peter Crone, and then my website. If they want to join Freedom or maybe a mastermind in the future, that's just petercrone.com. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Peter.
Thank you. A pleasure to be with you, fellow Virgo.
Oh, yes, exactly. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you. Bye.